said earlier, I have done this message before. It was inspired by a YouTube video that my good friend Suba sent to my wife. And from there, it developed into this. Look at your hands. If you look at them closely, they tell the story of your life. They have scars, lines, wrinkles. Mine have bumps from arthritis. As you look at them, those scars tell you stories. They remind you of things that have happened. You look at your hands and you can remember times when they applauded and cheered. You can remember times when they clenched in pain or fear or anger. You can remember the times that they reached out for help, or the times that they were folded in prayer. You can remember the times when they were teaching children, or they were guiding the unsteady or the unsure. Hands are capable of many things. They can wave a greeting, or they can reach out and shake a hand. The many things that they can do amazes me. Think about what they've accomplished for you and for others. You think about the gardens they planted and tended, the meals that they've prepared, the children that they fed, the tears that they wiped away, the things that you've built and the things that you've torn down. Your hands can be strong or they can be soft. You can use them to work. You can use them to create beauty. They can be many things. Hands are a symbol. When I was in the Union, there was a symbol. They said, 5 individuals, you bring them together in a union, they're stronger, harder to defeat. It's a symbol. Pilate symbolically washed his hands of responsibility for Jesus' crucifixion. Allstate will tell you, you're in good hands with Allstate. And this is the symbol they use. It's a symbol. You're in better hands with God than you are with Allstate. God can take care of you. You think about when you pick up a tool to do a job or complete a task. Your hand becomes an extension of that tool. If you put yourself in God's hands, you can be the tool that He uses to complete a task or to do a job. You have to have faith in God that He's going to use you. But He'll only use you if you allow Him to. You have to let Him use you. When you're facing hard or difficult times or difficult situations, you got to trust in the Lord. The old saying that life will knock you to your knees, well, that's true. But it puts you in a perfect position to call on God. It's not the trouble that we have or the adversity that we face that's the problem. It's how we handle it. And to demonstrate that, I've got a story that I've used before. But there was a young man, he was facing a difficult situation. And he wasn't quite sure how to handle it. His granddad told him, said, are you going to be an egg? Are you going to be a carrot? Or are you going to be a coffee bean? The young man had no idea He said an egg has a hard outer shell but a liquid center. A carrot is stiff and unbending. A coffee bean is merely a seed. He said, but you give them adversity, you give them a difficult situation, and they'll handle it differently. You take those three and you put them in a pot of boiling water. The egg will lose its liquid center and become hard. The carrot will lose its rigidity and become pliable and bendable. But the coffee bean embraces the water and releases its full flavor. That's what God can do for you. Adversity was the same, but it was handled differently by each of them. And when you face adversity, God can help you release your full flavor. When we face adversity, we have two choices. We can become bitter, or we can become better. If you trust the Lord and embrace the adversity, He'll get you through it and help you release your full flavor. But you have to put yourself in God's hands. You have to let Him use you. He has a purpose for each and every one of us. And you say, come on, Bill. God can't use me. I can't do anything. Or you say, oh, come on, I can't do this. I've done things. I've been places. I have a past. Well, if God brings you to it, He'll lead you through it. Regardless of what you feel your shortcomings are, God will get you there. Stop and think about it. He used Abraham, who was very old, to begin a nation. He used Mary Magdalene, who was a prostitute. He used Moses, who was a stutterer. He used David, who was an adulterer. He used Saul, who was persecuting and killing Christians. But He used them. God uses people, ordinary people, just like you and me. But you have to let Him use you. You have to give yourself to Him. There's so many things that can be done if you put yourself in God's hands. There is an evangelist by the name of David Ring. David suffers from cerebral palsy. But when he speaks haltingly. He has difficulty walking. But God has used that man. He's a terrific evangelist. Someone once asked him, said, David, don't you want God to heal you? He said, yes. I'd love for God to heal me, but more than that, I want God to use me. And someone else asked him, don't you want God to make you normal? And David Ring said, what's normal? Are you normal? God made me unique, and I'd rather be unique than merely normal. David Ring went on to tell the man, said, God doesn't make mistakes. There's a purpose for each of us. We call on God when we have a problem or we have a concern because we know that God can answer that concern or that problem. But we have to remember sometimes when He ourselves. There was an NFL lineman by the name of Mike Reed who retired from football and began to write songs. And he wrote a lot of country songs. And one in particular that he wrote was called Walk on Faith. It's always been a favorite of mine because some of the lyrics in it says, when the road is dark and the valley is deep, just walk on faith. Keep putting one foot down in front of the other. That's what we have to do. We have to trust God. He's going to get us to where we need to be. I once heard a pastor say that God knows our weaknesses. And if we are willing to allow Him, He'll work through those weaknesses. And sometimes He'll turn them into strengths. Now, I can testify to that. Because as hard as it is to believe, when I was a little kid, I was bashful. And I mean, painfully shy. I hardly ever look anybody in the eye. That was a weakness for me. How did I get over it? Well, I'm not exactly sure, not exactly sure when it happened or exactly how it happened, but the Lord was using my mother as His tool. You see, my mother was in charge of the children's programs at the church where I grew up. And every time there was something to be done, my mother would put me up in front of the church. This bashful kid, she'd send him up there to do a part in a skit or recite a scripture or something. Repeatedly, she put me up there. Each time after I did, people would come by and tell me what a good job I'd done. Now, I wasn't sure if they were just being nice or if maybe my mother had said, go by and offer a little encouragement. She would do that. But obviously, I overcame it because I have no trouble at all standing in front of a crowd talking to people. The Lord used my mother as a tool. I'm no longer bashful. I have confidence. All those times when Mother would put me up in front of the crowd, and I'd be up there reciting my parts, that built confidence in me. And I learned, as the other kids began to tell me what a good job I did, I realized this was a gift from God. God had done this for me. And I learned to trust Him to get me through whatever it was I had to do. And as I go along, I have people tell me, you have a really good speaking voice. I tell them that also is a gift from God. God gave me that for whatever reason, perhaps so I can stand up here and talk to you. As I move along through life, I trust God to get me where I need to be. All those times when I was up in front of the church as a bashful kid to recite, I learned to put myself in God's hands and He'd get me through it. And I continue to let God guide me. Yes, there have been times when I embarrassed myself. But that was the time mistake. I have long enjoyed talking to people and sharing my faith. But I do better when I put my faith in one pair of hands. Ryan, if you will, please.
One pair of hands on the mountains, one pair of hands on the sea, one pair of hands made the sun and moon, every bird, every flower, every tree. One pair of hands on the valleys, the ocean, the rivers, and the sand. Those hands are so strong, so when life goes wrong, put your faith into one pair of hands. One pair of hands heal the sick. One pair of hands raise the dead. One pair of hands calm the raging storm. And thousands of people were fed. One pair of hands said, I love you. And those hands were nailed to a tree. Those hands are so strong, so when life goes wrong, put your faith into one pair of hands. Those hands are so strong, so when life goes wrong, put your faith into one pair of hands. Put your faith into one pair of
Thank you, Ryan. Hands. My hands, God's hands. The work of my hands is to do God's work. I have faith that God is going to use me and guide me, and all I have to do is trust Him. The scripture says He will be with us always, and I know that's true. He guides me daily. When I was younger, I heard a saying that one of the nicest places to be is in someone else's thoughts. And one of the warmest places to be is in someone else's prayers. I like that saying, but I added to it. The best and safest place to be is in God's hands. You can be that tool that God uses. You can be the one He uses to do a job or complete a task. use you, but only if you allow him to. Regardless of what shortcomings you think you have, or regardless of where you've been or what you've done in the past, God can use you if you allow him to. God's love is eternal. And if you allow him to use you, you don't know what wonderful things you might see out there, or what wonderful things he can do using you. Put yourself